and welcome to Edie Extra, live from the Collaboration Hub at the Edie 26 conference in central London. And this is the place to be for you to learn about navigating some of the hottest topics and toughest challenges in sustainable business right now. We are bringing our long-standing podcast series to life here at the Business Design Center, recording short and snappy panel discussions that look to the horizon to discuss the next big trends facing corporate climate action. So, we are recording today's discussion, and the audio podcast will shortly be live on edie.net as well as on all of our streaming and podcast channels. For today, let me introduce you to our panelists. I'm Sidhi Mittal, ED Senior Reporter, and I'm delighted to be joined by Natalie Campbell, social entrepreneur at a very good company, and Abigail Ryan, Sustainable Manager at Gousto. Thank you both so much for joining us today.
Great, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
We are holding this discussion against an incredibly volatile backdrop. Since the start of the year, we have seen geopolitical tensions and trade route disruptions directly impacting food and energy security. For consumers, it's been a persistent cost of living crisis since COVID, and for the boardroom, it's a season of economic uncertainty, budget constraints, and difficult trade-offs. And with that polycrisis environment, the green premium, as some call it, the idea that sustainable choices cost more often becomes a brick wall. So with that backdrop, how do you keep on scaling sustainable initiatives and products in a way that you don't alienate your budget-concerned consumers?
In my experience, though I did hear yesterday from one of our speakers that this audience is bigger than expected, there aren't that many people who sustainability is their purchase driver, something that they'll pay more for that's going to make the decision. So it really is about thinking about what your primary purchase drivers are and thinking about what problem you're trying to solve for people. For Gousto, it's actually convenience. It's not really food waste. And when I think about personally, last week I'm a small customer, so I get all my laundry detergents and things delivered, and my package didn't arrive. And rather than just go to the shop and buy some detergent, I actually chased around and went to my neighborhood and looked around for my package. So the convenience USP had gone, but I really wanted my small package because it's all recyclable, there's no plastics in it, and that was the reason why I stuck with it. Sustainability isn't necessarily the reason why people will buy something, but it might be the reason why they stay, and it might be why they talk to their friends about the product.
Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, so a slightly different lens. So until recently, I was co-CEO of Baloo, and we're a B2B business, and the majority of our customers do actually buy us because they want a sustainable product, and they want a product where they can absolutely connect with provenance, the storytelling, and the work that we do around environmental conservation and clean water access in partnership with WaterAid. So we know that it's really, really important for us to be clear about what we do, why we do it, how we do it, how the profit flows through the business. We open source all of our data and share it, not just within our impact report, but audited accounts, which is a small business we don't necessarily need to do. And the reason we do that is to then say, okay, this is a model for other companies to follow. What we also, though, have to recognize is we are structured in a way, from a governance perspective, that allows us to do that. We are wholly owned by our foundation, and we do not distribute profits to shareholders. All of our profit goes to WaterAid. And so it's easy for us to make decisions that mean we can really hold our sustainability credentials high. I think for anyone listening to this, it's working out what does your business exist to do, exactly as you were saying, Abigail. Not just for the consumer, but also ownership. If you have shareholders and the primary driver of the business is to deliver shareholder value or to distribute profits down the line, you might be in a cycle of short-term thinking, because it's about the next quarterly report, it's about the next forecast, it's about what you're taking to the board meeting in a couple of weeks. And so if you understand that cadence within your business, you can start to work out, well, what can I really control? How can I do the micro actions that get us towards the bigger goals or the bigger targets that we might have set?
No, that's really interesting. And then another part of the conversation is how do you implement it structurally and systematically into the business? Abigail, how has Gousto shifted its procurement strategy to kind of build that resilience in and make sure that climate change-driven price hikes do not get passed on to the consumers?
Yeah, so For the first 10 years at Gousto, we were able to not change our prices at all, which is really exciting. Obviously, 2022 comes cost of living, food inflation in particular. We're really hit with that, so we have had to raise our prices a little bit. But fortunately, built into our menu, we have like such a wide range of recipes. We do have a bit of dynamic flexibility in that we can switch out recipes and switch out ingredients in order to make sure that we can still make the menu cost effective, because it's one price for, you pay per recipe. It doesn't really matter what recipes you pick. And then we also kind of work with our ingredients and kind of change things around where necessary and where possible so we can keep our supply chain as resilient as possible. We also have contingency suppliers for like almost everything. So if we're not able to get it from one place, or if there is a price hike in that area, we're able to kind of work with a different supplier. And everything that comes into our factories, we look at, the country of origin and where it's coming from, and we work directly with our suppliers as well to kind of manage expectations long term.
Shifting the focus from the consumer to the board now, and Natalie, you have a wealth of experience in senior leadership. When a board is staring at a spreadsheet of rising costs, what is the most effective way to frame social purpose as a risk mitigation tool rather than an optional overhead?
So the most important way is to not have to frame it. So I'm going to share the model that I encourage everyone to follow, which is when we think about ESG, the G has to come first. So what is the governing system, or what is the governing framework for your business? How is it structured? How is it set up? How does the business report on risk? What has been publicly stated around climate action? Whatever it is, really understanding that G. And for sustainability teams or anyone that has been tasked with doing work in this space, what can you embed within your governance structure that makes your job a lot easier over the long term? So going back to what I was saying about Baloo, I changed our governing documents, so our memo arts, to make our articles align to the Sustainable Development Goals 6, 12 and 13. So no matter what happens, I joined just before the pandemic, pretty much business revenue dropped overnight, but knowing that we exist to deliver Sustainable Development Goal 6 around clean water, 12 responsible consumption and production, and 13 climate action, means that we can make very different decisions in our business around what we will invest in, where we'll pull back funding from, and it all aligns to what we exist to do, which is not deliver shareholder returns in that way. So the G ultimately comes first. I think then it's working out the people around the table, around the boardroom table, what do they know about sustainability and their role in delivering both the compliance function of it, the risk mitigation aspect of it, so the risk that comes from the supply chains being disrupted because of climate change or the many other factors that affects the supply chain, and then working out who are the partners that your board really needs to know and understand and engage with, so that when you're bringing a business case to the table to say we need to invest in working with this partner in a more long-term holistic way, that they're immediately on board. So example, again from Baloo, we moved away from carbon offsetting in 2021. I looked at the market, it's complete Wild West. I was like, we're not doing this anymore. I want to work with a UK-based charity specifically on nature-based solutions. The trade-off meant that we could no longer call ourselves carbon neutral, because the framework for carbon neutrality based on PAS 2060 meant that you ultimately had to offset. So we were like, okay, well, we'll give up our carbon neutral status. That's challenging because it's on all of our packaging and it was a big part of our story. I was like, but we're not doing it anymore, and we're going to explain exactly why we're not doing it. And we started a partnership with Thames 21, where we could really get close to a nature-based solution in South London. And we've just extended that partnership so that we can really get close to regenerating an area and knowing what we're doing, as opposed to paying a third party to say they're delivering X number of benefits that we can't see, feel, understand, interrogate and get close to. And the board were with us lockstep on that. And I know it's harder because, especially if the G within your framework isn't necessarily there, but I think as sustainability professionals, knowing the climate that we're currently in and the challenges that we face, this is the stuff that we really need to bed in so we can weather the pendulum swing of focus and the short-termism that is inherent in the moment, the perma-crisis of now.
That's great. It reminds me of what our keynote speaker, Mike Berners-Lee, said yesterday, just embedding those values
Yeah.
in society, business across businesses, in your team. And it just, you'll see the ripple effect of that. Great stuff. But as inflation rises, we're seeing the conversation shift a lot around circularity as well, because there are resource constraints of all sorts. Abigail, I'd be interested to know if you have seen, or if you could share any specific instance where a circular initiative at Gousto actually lowered your operational costs instead of adding to them.
Yeah, well, from a packaging perspective, this is something that we are still looking at and still working on. Just, the nature of our business and managing food waste. Food waste is really our primary focus when it comes to, because the added benefit of the product. So making sure we're living that all the way through the factories. And unfortunately, with the way packaging works at the moment, saving food waste does have kind of a packaging cost. So we were looking at those trade-offs. And we haven't really been able to scale circular packaging with our business model yet, but it's definitely something we're interested in. But from a food waste perspective, we do a lot of work to make sure that we're living that all the way down to the factory. I think we have 0.26% of all of the food that comes into the factory is wasted. And when you're talking about thousands of tons of food a year, that's a really small number. So we're really proud of that. And part of that, one of the circular options that we have is we've introduced some of the food surplus actually then goes back into the canteen and then gets used in the canteen. We work with third parties, charities to pick up our food, and even boxes that don't get delivered can be donated as well. So it's a huge part of what we do. Food waste is just absolutely essential because it has such an impact both on the land use and the way our carbon footprint it happens.
I just want to pick up on that point because I think the other thing that we need to recognize is when we're talking about circularity, it's a system. And so when we apply systems thinking, lots of people look at businesses and say, what are you doing? Whereas the reality is we need the infrastructure to enable businesses to be able to lean into being circular. We are okay in the UK on recycling, but circularity, we are way behind where we need to be. And so when we're looking at packaging, glass is probably the packaging that we know how to recycle best. It's not necessarily in the space of circularity yet, but it has the most potential based on how much investment there is. On plastic, actually, we're pretty good. We have the infrastructure. And on aluminium, we're not. On things like Tetra, absolutely not. We do not have the infrastructure in the UK. And so we need that system. Sorry, cardboard and paper we're good on. But from a recycling perspective, circularity requires a whole other layer of investment, which requires government. It requires, the waste industry to start to drive innovation and be more transparent about exactly what they do. Most people cannot tell you what a waste organisation like Bristol or others do once they've picked up household waste. We cannot tell you what happens when our bins get collected. We don't know where they go. We don't know what the sorting methods are. So that whole system needs to lean into the circularity debate to enable other businesses, both small and large, to change the way that they work so that it's not costly, that it doesn't become a trade-off, and actually the end consumer then has absolute clarity on their packaging choices.
Exactly. Like when I'm speaking to my friends, they often ask me, if I recycle, does it actually get recycled?
Exactly. And that's why I talk about glass. So very quickly, when you buy a glass product, you can take that home, you can wash it, and you can use it again and again and again, and there's no packaging leak. It's probably a small example of one of the things that's closest to circularity, because you're giving that product ultimately a new life, and it's not necessarily ending back up in a waste stream and causing more energy use. So there are really small things that we can do to get us closer to circularity, but the bigger question is the systems change. Are we there yet?
Yeah, the government's due to publish a circular strategy very soon, so really looking forward to that. We have spoken about consumers and we've spoken about the board. I want to talk about employees a bit now. So purpose-led companies definitely attract talent and are able to retain it as well. We have seen research that shows that. But inflation is driving a wage-first mindset. And it's real. When you're in that cost of living crisis, you have to make pragmatic decisions. How can sustainability leaders then use social impact strategy to retain staff if they can't compete with other organizations on salary hikes? They're less ethical competitors, I mean.
So I'm going to flip your question and ultimately say each of us are responsible for the choices we make in life around where we work and what we do, and our choices around what we want to be paid in the organizations we want to align with. And I would say this, but the responsibility cannot solely sit on the organization. Individuals need to make their own choices. So if we take those two things and move it beyond just the social, I always think about organizations from the perspective of what are they inherently there to do. And if a business is truly purpose-led and they are leaning into something environmental or something social or some other mission, and they make that really clear through governance, so this is modeled from the board right the way through, then inherently they will do things in a different way. So it's more likely they will lean into telling the story of how they make decisions to the team. So there will be a team buy-in because they have a high level of trust in the leadership in the board. It's more likely that is an organization that will look after health and well-being. It's more likely that you'll be working along values-led, like-minded colleagues. It's more likely that you'll be working in a space that is considered. So going to work actually feels more joyful. The work you do feels more purposeful, and you're being looked after. That's why people stay versus companies that don't have a very clear why, or their why is to give as much money as possible to third parties. They will cut costs on those sorts of things, and therefore people will choose, or given a financial choice, it's less likely you'll lean into staying in those organizations because the other, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the rest of your Maslows are not looked after within those organizations. And so I think the conversation around why people stay is much deeper than just salary or wages. It's all of the other things that purpose-led businesses give you when you're working there, and the sorts of ways that we want to feel in the space that we spend the majority of our waking hours. You want to be around people that you connect with, that you like. You want to be doing something that's interesting and meaningful. And I think businesses will start to understand that and recognize it and build more of that into their day-to-day. So a slightly different take on your question.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, if you're on board, if your employees are on board, like that's the value. You get to go and you get to work at a company that you feel excited about and that you really, really believe in. And okay, sometimes, unfortunately, that does come with less pay, but you get to love it. And that's kind of a choice that you as an employee have to make.
And I'm going to say, so we make the assumption that it comes with less pay. As co-CEO of Baloo, I benchmarked salaries. We did not pay lower than our purpose-led competitors or our commercial competitors. What we didn't have was other things like bonuses. So if you were in a sales team and you were in a commercial organization, yes, you might be getting bonuses or a commission based on every single sale. We don't have those sorts of levers, but the baseline pay wasn't lower. And so and in the same way we always say paying for sustainability is going to cost you more. It doesn't always. So I think that's another thing for us to consider.
We're coming close to the time, so this is kind of my final question for both of you today. Short-termism, it is the enemy of impact. Beyond just purpose, what governance changes are you seeing actually moving the needle in 2026 to make sure that sustainability as a whole survives what others are calling this winter or a silent winter period?
So from a systems view, actually just not using the word sustainability. Everything that we're doing from a sustainability perspective is about business resilience and ensuring that regardless of what is going on in an uncertain world, that businesses, especially purpose-led businesses, can navigate it, get through it with teams that are happy, healthy, really engaged and productive, supply chains that are robust and resilient, where everyone is being paid fairly and. So that's the first thing. In a short-term climate as well, as I always say, do the 1%. Do the thing you can do today, do the thing you can do that week, do the thing you can do that month, do the thing over that quarter, because the pendulum will swing back. Keep fighting the good fight. There will be a time when we're back in that summer peak. And then specifically on broader short-term thinking, I'm going to come back to where I started. Maybe use this period to really unpick your organizational governance. If your board are not bought in because they're not trained, they don't understand, spend some time working with them on training and development, but not sustainability training and development, business risk, business resilience, compliance, whatever it is, legal responsibility. They really need to understand the power that they hold from a decision-making perspective. And if you do that work over time, you will get their buy-in.
I completely agree with everything Natalie's just said there. I think the other thing is just being really clear about like what you're going after as well. It's easy to talk about purpose and impact, but what does that actually mean? Like at Gousto, we have our mission statement of every meal leaves the world better off, which is great because it leaves us open to doing so many different things. But then when you actually look at people and say, okay, well, like, what are we doing for this? You need to be really, really clear about what you're going after. So you can have this broad, high-level purposes, but then drilling it down into, okay, we're looking at food waste, we're looking at health, we're looking at packaging, we're looking at carbon. Like, what are the specific things you're going after? How are you tracking them? And how can you move the needle that way?
Great stuff, and a lot of actionable takeaways as well for our listeners. That's all the time we have today for this ED Extra session. So thank you to our speakers for your time and for sharing amazing insights. And thank you to everybody in the audience for your time and attention as well. And I'll see you around.
Thanks so much for having us.